Welcome to this workshop on storytelling for impact. I'm Mel Watt, a fashion campaigner and communicator. I'm currently the Fashion Revolution Week coordinator and formerly led the global comms team, and I look forward to sharing lots of insights from my time at Fashion Revolution with you. Joining me today are my colleagues Lauren and Nikki, who very kindly helped me run the session and monitor the chat. Please note this workshop is being recorded and later shared on our YouTube channel, so it'd be lovely to see your faces, but do keep this in mind when turning your camera on. So before we begin, it would be brilliant if everyone could please use the chat to introduce yourself. It's a nice, small, and intimate group. We want to know your name and where in the world you're joining the call from. I am joining today's call from London. Hi, Laura from Spain. Jane from London. Lovely to... Wow, Joe from Melbourne. I hope it's not too late for you there. Verity traveling, so joining from Vietnam. Oh, lovely. Blestein from Belgium. Thank you for joining. Okay, great. So lovely to have you here. Today's workshop is part of the How to Be a Fashion Revolutionary workshop series we've been running for Fashion Revolution Week 2024, which marks our 10th anniversary as an organisation. The goal is to equip our wonderful global community, that's you, to be effective storytellers, community builders, educators, and campaigners for change. And we invite you to use these skills to join us for the next decade of fashion activism. For today's workshop, we're exploring the power of storytelling. This isn't meant to be a conventional workshop on how to write a book. Instead, my aim is to provide a fashion campaigner's perspective on how we can harness storytelling to creatively raise awareness and mobilise action around issues in the global fashion industry. I'm going to be sharing lots of poems, illustrations, and videos designed by our global network, so it will hopefully be something that resonates with the creative in you. As well as examples, there will be a series of creative prompts, so make sure you have something to write notes with. We'll give you around 7 minutes for each prompt, and we'll share some examples from previous sessions for inspiration. And after today's workshop, you'll receive an email with some recommended resources and useful links, as well as a recap of the creative prompts we covered today. So, who is Fashion Revolution and what is our story? Fashion Revolution was co-founded by Carrie Summers and Ursula de Castro in the wake of the Rana Plaza factory collapse to increase transparency in the global fashion industry and stand in solidarity of the people who make our clothes. Over the last decade, the Fashion Revolution movement has spread across 80 country teams and counting, and together we mobilise citizens, brands and policymakers through research, education and advocacy. Storytelling is an integral part of our work because stories can make us relate, connect, despair, and most importantly, act. We use storytelling for a diverse range of goals, from platforming the voices of supply chain workers to shifting aspiration towards a slower and fairer fashion industry. I wanted to guide today's workshop with this quote from writer Amitav Ghosh. The climate crisis is also a crisis of culture and thus of imagination. In a capitalist world, climate inaction thrives on a culture of individualism, short-sightedness, and mass consumerism. We know we need to move towards a fossil-free future, but the fashion industry, to use just one example, deepens our reliance on fossil fuels through the manufacturing of oil-derived clothing in coal-powered supply chains. The mass production, marketing, and consumption of polyester clothing provides the fossil fuel industry social license. In other words, it sustains its cultural relevance. The role of storytelling here, then, is to disrupt this narrative, to challenge cultural norms and to help us imagine the fossil-free world we want to collectively strive towards. So when we think about what stories we want to tell, we should keep this quote front of mind. From influencing legislation to shifting public mindsets, what and how something is said matters. Finding the right words can turn inaction into action. And here are just some of the ways we have used words to connect, challenge, and comfort. Between 2017 and 2019, we published a series of 5 fanzines that covered everything from craftivism and heritage to sustainable development and the environment. In Money, Fashion, Power, we explored the hidden stories behind your clothing and what the price you pay for fashion means. While Love Clothes Last interrogated the issue of waste and mass consumption, and hopes to inspire you to buy less, care more, and know how to make the clothes you love last for longer. Within these pages, we shared untold and confronting stories in the form of poetry, essays, illustrations, games, and photographies, some of which we'll be revisiting today. Our best-selling zines took a familiar media format to expose readers to the harsh realities of the global fashion industry and introduce radical new ways of thinking and being. And you can download the fanzine library on our website if you are interested. While these poems are very different in form, tone, and subject matter, they both invite us to question our relationship with fashion. The first, written by Holly McNish and published in Glove Clothes Last, redefines what beauty means. If the girl who made your skirt's not paid, you cannot say it's beautiful. If the pay is less than living wage, you cannot say it's beautiful. If the coloured dyes now lie in rivers, poisoned fish, polluted waters, if there's no sick pay, no toilet breaks, if the factories are in decay, no matter what your mirror says or how stylish you might look today, you cannot claim it's beautiful. The repetition here is simple yet profound, exposing the ugly truth behind our beautiful garments. The second poem, written by Tegan Smith for Fashion Revolution Singapore's Manifesto zine, invites us to find beauty in mending and making our own clothes, to honour the skill and craft behind their creation. I'll block fashion spam because I'll go make it myself. Though imperfect by hand, it's an act of free will to make things that last seasons and evade landfills, have a minimal or maximalist shelf. The style choice is yours, but remember, talk is cheap. There's exploitation on every supply chain thread. The price is the planet or workers' daily bread. Instead, let's buy less, make more, treasure what you keep. Sashiko personality into repair. Crochet your own magic with planet-friendly yarn. Reconsider each new hole as a chance to darn. I'll make it myself because I can decide what's fair. I'll make it myself because I can care where it goes. We only have this blue earth, so let's protect it and give time around the sun to every outfit. Let's start a fashion rev with our DIY clothes. If you want to experiment with writing your own poem, we have this cut and paste exercise in Money, Fashion, Power. To really challenge yourself, try to say a lot in the smallest amount of words possible. For example, in 19 words, you could say, my jeans see her, the invisible girl who stitched the seams, change the system, wear the truth, solution, revolution. In the same scenes, we shared a series of stories collected as part of the Garment Workers Diary project. Garment Workers Diaries provides a platform for workers across Bangladesh, Cambodia, Vietnam, India, and other garment producing countries to share their life struggles, to share their life stories, let's start that sentence again. Garment Worker Diaries provides a platform for workers across Bangladesh, Cambodia, Vietnam, India, and other garment producing countries to share their life stories, detail their daily routines, and reflect on their struggles and hopes for the future. The team builds direct, trusted, and independent channels of communications with workers and invites them to tell their stories in the way they want to tell it. Their work shines a light on the often hidden context, experience, and opinions of workers, so these can be included in decision-making processes that affect their lives. But just as stories can be empowering, they can be disempowering by robbing the story's characters of agency or falling into the category of trauma porn. Garment Worker Diaries reminds us that to do a story justice, it should be written in collaboration with and not on behalf of underrepresented communities whose voices have been historically ignored. Last year, we held an exhibition at the British Textile Biennial, which featured printed zine covers and pages, as well as illustrated work commissioned by Fashion Revolution teams in Brazil, Argentina, India, and Singapore. We chose to position these two pieces side by side to create a sort of artistic dialogue between the global north and the global south on the topic of waste colonialism, where clothes worn in the global north are being mass exported and dumped in the global south. On the left, we have a confronting poem by Wilson Oriema, which tells a familiar tale of throwaway fashion in the global north. And on the right, we see the tangible impact of the disposability and suffocation Wilson describes in Alessandra de Noral Millfront's Take Me Down to the Desert. This artwork tells the story of Latin American communities dealing with the influx of clothing waste. As a viewer, you are forced to meet their gaze and can no longer turn a blind eye to the waste that surrounds them. While We Don't Need It refers to the global south's rejection of waste colonialism, it also reminds brands and consumers alike to question whether we really need to produce and buy new clothes. The juxtaposition of these two works was really powerful, and encouraged visitors to zoom out and see the wider global story of fashion consumption and waste. In 2016, we introduced Clothing Love Stories. The ask was simple: share the story of your most cherished garment, and thousands of fashion revolutionaries responded, told in the form of reels, photographs, heartfelt captions, YouTube series, and even exhibitions, some of which you can see on the screen. Community stories of heritage, identity, and politics were woven into a global tapestry. No two stories look the same, but each form part of a collective narrative quilt on the importance of making love clothes last, providing their readers an accessible and inviting entry point to slow fashion. So, with that in mind, our first prompt is, what's your clothing love story? We're going to take around 7 minutes to start drafting a love poem or letter to your favourite piece of clothing. It could be as short as a haiku or as long as a sonnet. And you might want to include something like its origins. Where did you find it? Was it fate? Did it feel like love at first sight? Its heritage. Has the garment been passed down? Does it hold any cultural value? Its mending history. Have you ever repaired, upcycled, or restyled it? Any memories? Does it take you back to another time? Or experiment with personification. Imagine the garment is a person. How does it act and feel? And here are some of the lovely poems and letters written in previous workshops as you start to think about that. So we had this poem written by Molly. To the top, crafted out of a scarf by the hands of a woman I connected with online, and now would call a friend, who's been repaired at the sleeve and pairs beautifully with those trousers I love, and whose sleeves drape so wildly and free. I'm sorry I dipped you into my soup that time. The stains add to the charm. To share another example, another fashion revolutionary wrote, I want to pay tribute to my mother's floral skirt with pink, green, and lemon flowers. It's lasted me many summers, making me feel playful and carefree, its feminine energy beaming as I dance in the sun. This was as precious to my mother too. The soft cotton skirt sways with me as I walk, dreaming to be hung someday in my daughter's wardrobe. They are lovely examples. And I forgot to say, if you're feeling brave and would like to share your clothing love story in the chat, please do. I'd love to hear some, even if it's just a draft. And we're going to share one more example with you and then put the prompt back on the screen. We could go to the next slide, please, Lauren. Thank you. So this was written by Midashini about her grandmother's sari and is a really touching tribute to a past loved one. In my closet, delicate and fine, you lie. Grandma's silk, a treasure of mine. Once I wore you as a skirt with a smile so wide, a piece of her always by my side. But time passed and I outgrew the skirt that once adorned me. Now rests too fragile to wear, yet her love still lingers there. She's departed, her memory bright, in every thread woven just right. With mum's hand, you found new life. the symbol of love amidst the strife. So to the silk I make this vow, to repurpose you somehow, a part of her forever dear, in every stitch bringing me cheer, which is obviously very, very beautiful, and did make me tear up when I first read it. If we could put the prompt back on the screen, please, Lauren. Going to give you about another 3 minutes or so, and then we will move on to the next section of the workshop. Okay, we are going to move on to the second section of the workshop now. And oh, that's beautiful. We will come back and read those, and we'll send around the prompts, like I said, after the workshop, if you would like to continue or finishing writing your clothing love story. So we've explored the power of words, but what about the power of art? If we return momentarily to our Amitov Ghosh quote, art can help us overcome the crisis of imagination by visualizing the unseen. Art can help us picture what we otherwise couldn't imagine and transcend language by conveying meaning in a way words just won't allow. Art can also challenge, broaden, or even change our perspective. This cartoon was designed by Nadej Sigin, the country coordinator, Fashion Revolution Spain, for the Good Clothes Fair Pay campaign, which called for living wage legislation for garment workers worldwide. Here we follow the very different lives of two young girls, telling the all too common story of poverty pay in fashion. The girl on the left is overworked, underpaid, and hungry, a reality far removed from the girl on the right. It's only at the end of the cartoon that we realise the two girls are dreaming and live opposite lives. What is a forgettable nightmare for the girl on the left is the lived reality of millions of garment workers, mostly young women of colour. It's a twist that makes us examine our own privilege and poses a profound question of moral relativity. Why should the people who make our clothes work in conditions that consumers of clothes never have to think about or even dream of? These two images may look very different, but they both ask us to do the same thing, to imagine a different scenario. On the left, we have a job vacancy for a creative waste manager taken from one of our zines. Successful applicants need not apply because the job in 2017 did not exist, but of course it should have. The vacancy maps out the parameters of this role and calls on us to contact our favourite brands and demand they take responsibility for the waste they create. The second artwork, designed by Lucilla Chiara, is one of resistance. Hands clutching a megaphone fight to break free from a fashion system that restrains and exploits them. It's a powerful symbol of defiance as garment workers and unions continue to risk their jobs and even their lives by advocating for safer working conditions and fair pay. In both images, the story is deliberately incomplete. What if the fashion industry meaningfully tackled textile waste? The first image asks. What if the people who make our clothes' voices were heard? Both artworks invite us to write what happens next. In part due to its debated origins, this quote has been continually parroted in the sustainability space. It reminds us that it's often a lot easier to imagine all the ways in which the world could crash and burn, in part because we're already so exposed to this imagery, than it is to imagine the dismantling of the very systems that drive this destruction. The latter is difficult, but it's certainly not impossible. So I challenge you to start sketching out what your fashion utopia looks like. Using this fill in the blank exercise as a starting point, define what fashion means to you. Another way to approach this is by mapping out what is, i.e., the current state of the fashion industry today, versus what it could be, what the future could look like if we solved fashion's most pressing issues. This framework can provide a basis of hope and journey for your story. Now, you only have 7 minutes to do this, but the good news is that the possibilities are endless. And if you would like to, we encourage you to share your fashion utopia with us in the chat. First, going to share what some other participants came up with earlier this week. So, fashion to me is about craftsmanship and self-expression. Fashion should not only be about consuming, but about celebrating and honouring. It's time for fashion to work in harmony with nature and remember that love clothes last. Someone else said, fashion to me is about solidarity and joy. Fashion shouldn't be not only about consuming, but about, what does that say? Rewearing and compensating. It's time for fashion to practice fairness and slowness and remember that love clothes last. And then for the second part of the exercise that I mentioned, this is how I would personally approach it. So for me, the fashion industry is three things. It's wasteful, it's exploitative, and polluting. So what if the opposite were true? What if instead fashion was intentional and circular? What if it was fair, equitable, and humane? What if it was clean and regenerative? So zooming on to wasteful, if we can go to the next slide, please, Lauren. Poses the question, how do we get there? We know where we want to start and we know where we want to end, but what are the steps? Next slide, please, Lauren. So, for example, brands should disclose their production volume so we actually know the scale of the problem we're dealing with. They should commit to degrowth, so there's a tangible commitment to actually be part of the solution. And they should upskill workers in circularity to make sure that no one is left behind in the just transition. Governments should introduce extended producer responsibility to ensure that brands take responsibility for the waste they produce. They should also invest in recycling infrastructure to make it so much easier for citizens to responsibly dispose of their clothes. And as citizens, we should all call for these changes and continue to make love clothes last. And then that provides a kind of basis for a story could write in a number of ways. But for now, we will return to the prompt. Next slide, please, and give you around 5 minutes to start mapping that out. And if you would like to, please do share that in the chat. I'm going to share what Laura has put in the chat. Fashion to me is about feeling good and expressing your personality. Fashion should be not only about consuming, but about respecting and reinventing. It's time for fashion to be fair and responsible, and remember that love goes last. And then Freya says, fashion to me is about vibrancy and joy. Definitely. Fashion should be not only about consuming, but about empowering and prolonging. It's time for fashion to slow down and prioritize quality and equity. And remember that love goes last. Fashion to me is about personality and resilience. It should be about enduring and loving. It's time for fashion to realize that its wasteful ways are damaging air, land, water, and humanity, all for selfie opportunities and influences to spur people into wasting money and resources. I remember that love goes last. Well, you are not wrong there. Thank you for sharing. We're now going to move on to the final section of the workshop where we'll be looking at film. So we've talked about how words can help us to understand and how art can help us to visualize, but how does film help us to relate? A brilliant example of this is Fashion Revolution Guatemala's documentary, Cia Paca, which explores the impacts of the national secondhand clothing trade. Through a series of community interviews, the narrative defines the value of a garment not by the price on the label, but by the real cost of labor, its impact on our natural resources, and the urgent need to reform our environmental and textile waste treatment policies. Highly recommend you watch it. It's available on our YouTube channel, which is a treasure trove of stories if you would like to go and watch them, and we will be playing some very shortly. The campaign that brought Fashion Revolution into being, Who Made My Clothes, called on fashion brands of all sizes to be more transparent about their supply chain policies, practices, and impacts. Asking who made my clothes quickly became a staple ask of Fashion Revolution weeks, and in 2017, we launched this choreographed film produced by Futura. It's one of those videos that whenever it comes on my feed, I watch the whole thing through. I think it's really beautiful, and it helps to visualize the millions of people who make our clothes, building solidarity across the supply chain, from the farmer who grows the cotton to the factory that dyes the fabric, to the sewist who stitches the final pieces together. Through the use of music and dance, there's a strong emotional quality coupled with a resilient undertone. The effect is humanizing, helping many viewers to see, some for the first time, the international struggle and turmoil that too often goes into the creation of our wardrobe. Thus, film can also be really useful for making complex issues simple and visually engaging. Every year since 2017, we've published a Fashion Transparency Index to spotlight how much information the world's largest fashion brands are sharing about their environmental and social practices and impact. It's used by a diverse group of people, from investors and brands to trade unions and civil society organisations. But we also want to empower citizens to use this data to demand greater transparency and accountability from their favourite brands. In aid of this, last year we commissioned an animation by Isaac Holland and James Hatley to explain the importance of transparency in the context of the climate crisis and introduce our 2023 edition. We used a simple problem versus solution narrative and included an end call to action to use our data to fuel your activism.
With time running out to act on the climate crisis, transparency matters more than ever. Transparency is a crucial first step for measuring and reducing fashion's footprint. Without it, problems go unaddressed in complex global supply chains because we can only fix what we can see. As citizens, we have a right to know how, where, by whom, and at what human and environmental costs our clothes are made. Fashion Revolution believes transparency is essential for achieving systemic change in the global fashion industry. That's why, every year since 2017, we published the Fashion Transparency Index to spotlight how much information the world's largest fashion brands are disclosing. And it's working. More brands than ever are telling us more than ever. Things like their carbon footprint and child labour policies. Increased transparency has fueled the beginnings of a global greenwashing crackdown and has made recent workers' rights wins possible. Progress is also being made in a notoriously secretive luxury sector, with brands disclosing their factory lists for the first time. This year, we introduced stronger climate change indicators to track brand progress on decarbonisation. And for the first time in 2023, 2 brands scored 80% or higher, proving that while transparency is achievable, it's still the bare minimum for change. Industry-wide transparency is still far away, so let's keep holding brands accountable and use these findings to fuel your activism. Read our latest report on our website.
Returning to the Good Clothes Fair Pay campaign for a moment, we had to continually find new and experimental ways to spread the message. One of the challenges we faced was navigating widespread consumer misconceptions about what living wage legislation would mean for the price of clothing, especially during a cost of living crisis. Besides myth busting, we had to find new, innovative ways to convey the importance of the issue. So we planned a spoof campaign with our friends at Clean Clothes Campaign. The idea was to post a series of fake job vacancies to raise awareness around poverty pay in fashion, based on the real-life working conditions in garment production countries. We first asked ChatGPT to write our fake vacancies, but it flat out refused because the working conditions described were too exploitative. This then became a story. If the real-life pay and working hours of garment workers is unacceptable for AI, why is it acceptable for the mainstream fashion industry? Our reel was widely viewed, shared by influencers, and even reported on because we used AI itself, a topic of popular discourse, in such a novel and confronting way. A key takeaway from this is to consider your audience. What sorts of stories are they reading? What are their cultural references? And how do you speak their language? We're about to play the launch video for Good Clothes Fair Pay. When watching, have a think about what the characters, context, journey, and action are.
Wearing good clothes means the people who made them receive fair pay for their work. But right now, most textile and garment workers cannot afford to live in decent housing, eat healthy food, or go to the doctor. They even struggle to send their kids to school. A living wage is not a luxury, it is a fundamental human right. We demand laws that protect the human right to fair pay. We want to see a living wage for the people who make our clothes around the world. The EU has the power to change this. Help us get to 1 million signatures for Good Clothes Fair Pay. Sign now.
So you might be asking, what do we mean by characters, context, journey, and action? The characters are the people who give the story a focus and personality, the people that the audience can empathise with. In this story, the primary characters are the people who make our clothes and the European Union. The context defines the setting and provides the crucial details we need to understand the story. The context here is that millions of garment workers are underpaid for their work. A good story unfolds with a conflict that is central to the plot. Maybe the main character has an obstacle to overcome in order to achieve the main goal. This is what we mean by the journey. In this animation, the EU and its citizens have the power to change the law to achieve the goal of eradicating poverty pay in fashion. And finally, the action refers to creating a compelling narrative, developing a clear message or ask, and delivering this message in a way that encourages your audience to take action. So here the ask is simple and clear. Sign your name in support of good clothes, fair pay. In the final creative task of this session, we invite you to draft a story concept where the main character is the planet. Structure your story using the character's context, journey, and action framework, and consider what medium you'd like to tell it in. Maybe the planet is taking revenge on its inhabitants, or maybe you want to personify an environmental problem like water pollution. You only have 7 minutes to brainstorm some ideas, and as always, feel free to share them in the chat. And here are 2 examples for inspiration. So the first was a story where the hero was a small business owner supporting local artisans, but is threatened by big fashion giants who have copied their designs. He's fighting to save the planet and its people. I think here there's a really fun opportunity to play with size, with the big giant villains, if you will, and the smaller underdogs that are small businesses. Can even kind of play around with the idea of the planet being captured and being saved. And then the other idea that we discussed in a previous session was a Disney-esque animation series aimed at children that humanizes the issues of deforestation, water contamination, and air pollution, big environmental problems in the fashion industry. So children would emphasize with a tree torn from its home, water dyed with toxic colors, and traveling air that's polluted by different production facilities. So hopefully that gives you a basis to write your own narrative draft, and we will give you around 7 minutes to do this. And while you're writing, I'm going to share 2 clothing love stories that were written earlier in this workshop. The first is a tribute to Amise. Please let me know if I'm saying your name incorrectly. Father who is unwell and has an old jumper that mum knitted for him about 40 years ago. So the poem is shiny grey like you, daddy, shiny grey, falling apart like you, daddy, falling apart, warm and soft like you, daddy, warm and soft. I will love it forever like you, daddy, I will love it forever. And then Nikki shared, you wait patiently in my wardrobe, grey and white, zip worn but working, cared for and loved, resting quietly, waiting on our next adventure. I found you in London and we've been together for decades. Like an old friend, you're a comfort, reminding me I can do anything. And Freya has also sent us a poem. 3,000 miles away, we came together, you so small, dirty and battered, sitting forlornly at the bottom of a bin. My dream bag, waiting here for me. I grabbed you in a dramatic embrace, took you home to warmth and comfort, doused you in vinegar, good tip, scrubbed you with bicarb, in an elegant start to our new relationship, but one that cemented our love. Now I see you and think of my other home, think of our many nights together, and know that with a splash more vinegar, you'll be here for many more years to come. I love that, and the way that clothes really can transport you to a completely different time and place. Thank you, everyone. Give you about, let's say, 5 minutes or so, and then we will conclude. going to give you 1 more minute and then we will start wrapping up. We have got some story ideas that I'm going to share. A group of influencers who are consumers and advocates of fast fashion wake up one day in the bodies of workers in garment factories. They've been transferred to a parallel reality where they have to make all the clothes they ever purchased or been offered by brands in the real conditions they were made. They have one way to escape the situation. They can go back to the real world for 1 month early and use their influence to create a huge fashion revolution and change the rules of the industry. If they fail, they're back to making clothes in a factory forever. It's like that Barbie movie meme. You can have the Birkenstock or the hill. I think it was that. That's really, I think, really powerful. In my story, the storyteller would be a simple item of clothing that is followed from creation to decomposition. It'd recognize the people who bring it to life, its transportation, the person who buys it cheaply and discards it, and it charts its journey to a mass dump site, reflecting the impact upon the planet throughout its life cycle. Yeah, there's actually a brilliant book written by Lauren Bravo called Pre-Loved, which is about someone who is, I think, fair to say, in the middle of a sort of life crisis, and so quits or leaves their job and then starts volunteering in a charity shop. And the sorts of people that they meet, it's really beautiful. But in between every chapter or so, there's the story of items that ended up in charity shops from when they were first used to the person who donated it, to the reason they were donated, and in later chapters, people picking it up and repurposing it in their lives. And I think it follows a very similar story, and it was very touching. Pre-Loved by Lauren Bravo. I will also type it in the chat. Okay, let's start wrapping up and answering the question, what makes a good story? So to summarize what we've covered today, a good fashion story invokes a strong emotional feeling or connection. That could be surprise, anger, or hope, powerful emotions that we can channel into action. It should have a relatable factor, helping the audience to empathize with the characters and the cause. A good story broadens or even changes your perspective and has the potential to challenge cultural attitudes and behaviour. And a good storyteller should use these three ingredients to send a clear message and ask, moving their audience into action long after the story is over. I do have one final creative prompt to leave you with, and that's to take part in our storytelling campaign we're running for Fashion Revolution Week. We Are Fashion Revolution invites our global community to share what it means to be a fashion revolutionary. And we've already seen so many wonderful, wholesome, and inspiring responses, which you can scroll through on our Instagram. On our website, you'll find a series of templates, story prompts, and GIFs, which you can customize and share online. And we really hope you'll be part of our global story. After today's session, we'll recap the creative prompts and share some recommended resources, some of which you can see on the screen. So we have the Clothing Love Story Guide. The second, written by Rachel Arthur, is especially great if you are a marketer, and about how do you communicate climate action and stories accurately but meaningfully. How do you shift aspiration to more conscious lifestyles? And then the third is a brilliant book by Claire Press called Where Next, which helps us imagine around 16 plus different scenarios in which the fashion industry could take, helping us to picture is so important for action, but also helping balance more negative stories with positive and motivating narratives is really important, and is our role as storytellers to do so. And finally, we would love to hear your thoughts on today's workshop so we can keep making Fashion Revolution Week even bigger and better. The QR code takes you to a quick and easy survey to fill out. You then have the option to enter into our international prize draw and be in a chance of winning 3 brilliant prizes kindly gifted by the Craftivist Collective, including a very fitting storytelling kit. I really hope you enjoyed this workshop and can treat today as a starting point to start writing your own stories. I saw a comment that says I am not a story writer, so sorry, but no need to apologize. Everyone can be a storyteller, and there is a role for everyone in the movement. So we're really glad that you're here and hope you can go away with some of those prompts and share them with us. We would love to see what you come up with and the stories that you tell next. So with that, thank you so much everyone for coming. It's been wonderful to see you. This has been our last workshop of the series. We will be uploading all of them on YouTube so you can catch up on any that you missed. And we look forward to hopefully running more series like this in the future. So thank you so much everyone, and we look forward to keep seeing you take action with us after Fashion Revolution Week. Thank you. I'm glad. Thanks everyone. Bye.